Some Sundays it feels like I also get to go to a concert. When Dr. King went to Washington in 1963 and delivered the speech for which he is most famous, he did say, "I have a dream," and cast into our collective awareness a vision of beloved community for which we still yearn and strive. But he also said, "In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check." In saying that, he was speaking of reparations. He likened the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence to a promissory note written to every American, guaranteeing the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. King pointed out the ways in which our government had defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned, he said. King lamented the conditions of poverty and discrimination faced by people of color back then. He called on our country to make good on the promise enshrined in our founding documents, and this was not the only time that Dr. King called for reparations in his speeches and in his books. A piece that I find most compelling is the way that King framed the conversation in our shared American values as a land of liberty and opportunity. Reparations can get mistakenly framed as charity or an entitlement or some sort of handout. But in truth, the concept is rooted in repair. Reparations is a way to repair something that has been broken. In his highly acclaimed piece in The Atlantic back in 2014, The Case for Reparations, Ta-Nehisi Coates explains the goal of the concept. What is needed, he wrote, is an airing of family secrets, a settling with old ghosts. What is needed is a healing of the American psyche and the banishment of white guilt. The banishment of white guilt. What I'm talking about, he continues, is more than recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to a spiritual renewal. I remember a conversation I had with a contractor who was doing some work for me on my roof. He shared with me some of his struggles as a small business owner and how working for some other big company might be the easier way. But he complained about a state program that gave financial incentives to people of color starting small businesses. And he wondered, where was his support? But this guy had generational wealth and support. He had his dad and two of his brothers all did similar work. And when he hit hard times, I witnessed his family pitch in to help him. That's the point. Our country has systematically undercut generational wealth for black people, in particular for lots of folks on the margins. I recently read about a 2019 Yale University study revealing a dramatic disconnect in our understanding of the financial situation for black people in our country. The story revealed that, quote, most Americans believe that black households hold $90 in wealth for every $100 held by white households. So I found this comments about the study from a book, The 1619 Project. But here's a question, and it's a real question. I'm going to ask you to shout out an answer if you feel compelled to. Most Americans believe that black households hold $90 of wealth for every $100 by a white household. And that's incorrect. What do you think the real amount is? 60? 15? 10? 20? All right. The real answer is around 10 to 13. Reparations is about thinking like a community instead of thinking like an individual. What does the community need in response to the harm that has happened? Not what do I need to do or what would work for me. It doesn't really mean anything for me to say, well, I never owned slaves or stole land from indigenous people or blocked someone from home ownership through a restrictive racial covenant, or like I wasn't there putting Japanese Americans in internment camps. That wasn't me. We need to start thinking like a community, because stating things like that just doesn't contribute anything to the conversation. Instead of refusing to be blamed, ask what is needed. What do we need to repair, to heal, to bring more justice to the situation? We need to think like a community, not think like an individual. Reparations can often begin in education, in helping the community understand the situation that we're in. New York State passed the Amistad Law 10 years back, mandating schools to teach comprehensive instruction on the American slave trade and the impact on our country and on New York State and on our people. And currently the state is hosting public hearings on reparations for another initiative. There was a hearing here in Binghamton just a few weeks back, and I regret missing it. This group is currently just soliciting input and feedback with the likelihood of new legislative proposals when they publish their report later this year. This may end up talking about education again, or maybe they'll tackle housing or healthcare or climate or poverty. We'll see. In the news article that I read about the hearings, Commission Chair Chanel Hawkins says, "There's still a lot of hurt and trauma. The healing needs to happen, especially when we see there are inequities that are still present today. We said that slavery happened many years ago, and we're still feeling the impact of that today. So we invite the Southern Tier to be part of the healing process." So what might reparations look like for a congregation? I suspect our monthly special collections are a small beginning of that work, not because we're sending money to a group or organization that we think is doing good work, but because we're trying to develop relationships with those groups and organizations. Money is one way to approach reparations, but at root, relationships are the key. There's a fascinating case study online about the first parish Unitarian Universalist in Needham, Massachusetts. During some research and investigation for an anti-racism workshop, the minister uncovered a deep history of slavery associated with the congregation there in Massachusetts that she was serving. Reverend Katie Scudera went on and offered some powerful truth-telling about the Needham UU's founding slave-owning minister. There was no money involved in this example, just facing the harm that was wrought with eyes open. Consider another example. The Akron UU Church has what they call reparations through music. On their church website, they explained that part of their anti-racism work led them to what the music committee is initiating taking and offering every time we use a spiritual in our services. It's a recognition that we owe a tremendous debt to the catalog of music recognized as spirituals, but no one is listed as the recipient of royalties for that. The music committee, they go on to say, has designated the local Akron nonprofit group, Youth Excellence Performing Arts Workshop, as the recipient of this offering because of the transformative, life-altering work that YEPA, Youth Excellence Performing Arts Workshop, does for the young people in the Akron area. Here's a third example. I attended a UUA workshop on reparations a few weeks ago, and I listened to the Reverend Oscar Sinclair and a lay leader, Louise Livesey-Al, talk about an internal racism audit that they did at Unity Unitarian in St. Paul, Minnesota, more than a decade back, that led to the groundwork for their thinking and perspective when a bequest came their way of a significant chunk of money. And in discussion and through discernment, that congregation decided to give that money in the form of reparations to people affected by the impacts of racism and oppression in St. Paul. The choice that they made over 10 years ago has led that congregation to be remarkably engaged with the community around them to this day. A final example I'll offer is from Camp Unirondack, the UU youth camp that I attended growing up. Recently, the email from executive staff have included a tag with a land acknowledgement. Unirondack is located on stolen Haudenosaunee land. By themselves, land acknowledgments can feel a little bit less like a statement about injustice and a little more like signaling virtue. Are we planning to give the stolen land back? Some people will ask. And a real response to this tension is not so simplistic, of course. On the website, under the page about camperships and discounts, the camp has written this: Camp Unirondack is committed to anti-colonial justice. That is why Unirondack is free for indigenous campers. We recognize that the Haudenosaunee land we occupy does not belong to us. We recognize that it may not be possible to fully reconcile that fact. There are many ways we can do right now to address the harms of ongoing colonial violence in our communities. During our time as occupants here, we strive to be good stewards and caretakers of the land so that it may be in good health for future generations. We use our platform as educators to teach our campers and staff about the painful realities of colonial history in North America and the ongoing struggles of indigenous peoples today. We hope to inspire a generation of youth who will fight back against colonial injustice in our communities. So reparations can take many forms. It may be about sending money in a particular direction, such as an investment or a divestment, or simply offering uncomfortable truth about our history, such as about the Tulsa race riot the Tulsa race massacre in 1921. It may be about crafting and advocating legislative changes at various levels from federal to local, or it may involve reconciling among communities where harm has been committed. What might it look like for us? Our Unitarian Universalist values call us to build beloved community. Our core values of generosity, equity, justice, they lead us to engage with conversations happening in and beyond our congregations to repair what is broken among us. Most of the work of justice and repair is about relationships. I'm not suggesting a particular program or path. I'm not offering answers. I hope that we will reflect together more deeply and honestly about our values and the harm that we know has happened and is happening in our circles. May we trust that we can think like a community rather than like individuals. May we lean into relationships around us where harm has been experienced. May we be curious together about what repair could look like here and in the community around us and in our country. May we speak truth, may we love justice, and may we move humbly through a hurting world. In a world without end, may it be so. Let us join in singing our closing hymn. In our hymnals, it is number 323.